Welcome to our worship service. Let's settle into our space, taking a deep breath in and out. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe we are all connected in this world, and we value the worth and dignity of each and every person. We pull on the wisdom of many sources to teach us, guide us, and help us understand this world. As we prepare our hearts for worship, let us remember our connections through our collective chalice lighting words. Please join me. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share. Now we take a moment to acknowledge our connection to those whose land we occupy.
We gather on the homeland of the Piscosa, where they lived for generations upon generations and were the stewards of this land. The Piscosa people still live here.
Under the 1855 Yakima Treaty and the Cession Agreement of 1893, the Piscosa retained 36 square miles of this homeland, on which their traditional hunting, fishing, and gathering rights were guaranteed.
For almost 2 centuries, the United States government has broken its treaty obligations. The rights of the Piscosa were stolen by the government through fraudulent surveys, indifference, and intentional violations.
Much of the Piscosa land was transferred to colonists and corporations. None of the remaining land was preserved for the Piscosa. Hunting, fishing, and gathering rights were denied.
In 2010, the fishing rights of the Piscosa were finally confirmed through litigation.
The government still refuses to acknowledge their land rights.
The Piscosa continue their traditions and seek to have all their rights recognized.
Our opening words are from Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. Come, let us worship. Please raise your voices and spirit in our opening hymn, Wake Now, My Senses.
Wake now, my senses, and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your love, giving, receiving, as love shows us how. Wake now, my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry.
I invite you into a time of meditation. Settle into your space, plant your feet firmly on the ground. Take a deep breath in and out. Let your shoulders relax, and if you so choose, close your eyes. Let your mind and heart wander. Let it wander over this past year's journey in worship. We started the year exploring our roots and learning about our histories. What do you remember from that time? What did you learn? Then we moved on to finding inspiration, or that which reminds us to breathe. How did you connect to inspiration? And what inspired you? Finally, we looked at what we valued through the lens of our UU principles, the Cuff Covenant, social justice, and just being in community. Once we understood what we valued, we made the effort to learn how to embody those values in our lives. What is it that you value? And how does it show up in your life? Take the time to sit with these lessons from this year. Let them settle into your spirit, heart, and mind. We offer gratitude to all those who shared their wisdom with us this past year and open our hearts to new ways of being Unitarian Universalists. Amen. Please enjoy our musical interlude, Song of Gratitude, performed by Vern Smith.
I'm grateful for the sun that shines. I'm grateful for the rain. When life's bumps and life's bruises come, I'm grateful all the same. So just knowing that I'm a lonely soul, hand in hand in a world full of lonely souls, brings peace and love to my beating heart, and faith blooms in me again. I'm grateful for music that I may hear. I'm grateful for the tunes, the songs that seem to flow through my mind like a river chasing the moon. So just knowing that I'm a lonely soul, hand in hand with every lonely soul, brings peace and love to my beating heart, and faith blooms in me again. I'm grateful for the smiling face. I'm grateful to see you again. I'm grateful for nature all around us, for feeling each joy and each pain. Somehow knowing that we are all lonely souls, hand in hand with every lonely soul, brings peace and love to my beating heart, and faith blooms in us again. What is this faith that I'm speaking of? It isn't some old bearded man up above. It's music and poetry, beauty and love, in all of us everywhere. It's music and poetry, beauty and love, in all of us everywhere.
Our first words of wisdom come from African-American author Alice Walker. To acknowledge our ancestors means we are aware that we did not make ourselves, that the line stretches all the way back, perhaps to God, or gods. We remember them because it is an easy thing to forget that we are not the first to suffer, rebel, fight, love, and die. The grace with which we embrace life, in spite of the pain, the sorrows, is always a measure of what has gone before.
Our year in worship was framed by 3 themes. The first theme was exploring our roots, and we looked at many ways in which we were rooted in our history. The first thing that we looked at was our land and how it was the Wenatchee people's land, or as we know now, the Piscosa. We learned the story of the 2 bears instead of Standing Rock. We learned how the treaties were not honored by our government and how their fishing rights were taken away. And now we have our land acknowledgement that's in each of our services. We talked about our Unitarian Universalist and Unitarian Universalist theology and how the roots go back deep in different ways. Our Unitarian is our reason, our intellect, those ideas around the inherent worth and dignity of each person and our own individual right to search for truth and meaning. Our Universalist theology is rooted in that one and loving God that is there for us and forgives us and sustains us and allows anyone to be saved. And then we have our Unitarian Universalist theology rooted in both of those concepts, but also expanded to have us open up into our principles, our sources, and in the many ways that we find truth and meaning and love with each other. We looked at our social justice history and how it was different from Unitarians and Universalists, how Unitarians used words and pamphlets in their social justice work, and how Universalists used preaching and acts and service in their social justice work. We looked at our own personal history, which we do every year, and it's so lovely to think about all the things that have happened since this church was founded in 1985. So many things, so many different places of home in this building and the future that this building will provide for another building. And we looked at our own personal history. We looked at where we came from. What were our ancestors? How are we rooted in them? Lynn provided a service looking at the dark roots of our history and how racist concepts and ideas came through that history. And Deb talked about the many teachers and invited many people from the congregation as well as her own personal life to talk about how they learned about life and what were their teachers, which in turn were Deb's teachers. We're so grateful for all these different ways that we have found rootedness, not only in our own selves, but in our land, in our theology, in our history as a congregation, and in the ways that we do that together and on an individual basis.
Our second words of wisdom are from our hymnal and written by Reverend Dr. Ralph Helverson. Deep in ourselves reside the religious impulse. Out of the passions of our clay it rises. We have religion when we stop deluding ourselves that we are self-sufficient, self-sustaining, or self-derived. We have religion when we have some hope beyond the present, some self-respect beyond our failures. We have religion when our hearts are capable of leaping up at beauty, when our nerves are edged by some dream in the heart. We have religion when we have an abiding gratitude for all that we have received. We have religion when we look upon people with all their failings and still find in them good. When we look beyond people to the grandeur of nature and to the purpose in our own heart. We have religion when we have done all that we can and then in confidence entrust ourselves to the life that is larger than ourselves.
In our second theme for this year, we were tapping into inspiration. And remember, inspire meant an ability to breathe. So we looked for ways that allowed us to breathe, allowed us to be, allowed us to look to life. And we started that inspiration by looking at darkness and how it can inspire us, and what are the different ways that darkness gives us the ability to rest and renew. We looked at stories of people in the congregation and what they were inspired by. We looked at transition as a way of inspiration and how those life quakes can be something that changes our perspective and our ways of looking at the world, and what we can do to be inspired by them and move into different ways of being. We looked at growing a beautiful soul and what's needed there. We looked at all the ways that looking at beauty and acknowledging life and gratitude allows our soul to grow and allows our soul to become bigger than just this little thing in a box that allows us to appreciate the life that we're living. We were inspired by the story of the immigration of Dr. Harvey, inspiration from the inauguration day, and Amanda Gorman, Be the Light. Remember that speech and poem that she gave, as well as the speech that President Joe Biden did. We looked at teachers like Howard Thurman and Phyllis Cole Day, who brought words and art to inspire us in different ways, and other ways of poetry. We looked at radical love to heal the world and how we can expand our compassion, not just this kind of flimsy compassion of, oh, I just love your neighbor, that kind of thing, but a bigger, greater compassion in the sense that it runs deeper, and you need to work on yourself in the compassion and love that you have for yourself in order to love others. And that takes real work, real deep work. And then we broke out into rooms, Zoom rooms, and talked about possibilities that we have been inspired of in this year. What are ways that we could come together? What are ways that we have looked to each other to be inspired this year? We created book groups, we created garden groups, hiking groups, all of these different ways that we inspired each other and helped each other live through this time of disconnection and isolation, whether it be through Zoom or being out in the outside. So what inspired you this year? What inspired you to breathe a little bit better? Where are your forms of inspiration? What tapped into your soul to make it grow and make it bigger and more compassionate?
Our third and final words of wisdom are found in our hymnal and are written by Reverend Olympia Brown. Stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it. There is nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before us the loftiest ideals, which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, that you are strong enough to work for a great, true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation, always trusting in the one God which ever lives and loves.
Our final theme was embodying our values. And we looked at the power of our community and what we've been able to do, not just in the history of this congregation, but also through this time of COVID. We've looked at how we've pulled together in different ways, how we've not only just done that for our church community, but our larger community and the social justice issues that we've worked on. We looked at commitment and the tools that we need to make a commitment. We really looked at what we valued and what those values meant. What is it that we value in our community, in our church community? And how does that represent the way that we act in our church? How does that look? Do we walk our talk? We asked the question of how we live into them. Jim talked about how he had to find a way to live into his values when he encountered a difficult situation. We talked about how to be sustainable, not only in our church community, our larger community, and in our life. How do we sustain and be sustainable in our practices to take care of the earth? Steve gave us a wonderful service about the rights of earth versus humans, the rights of animals versus humans, and how those were important and what they meant. We looked at racial justice. We had our racial justice groups give different talks around how they had explored racial justice this year, and I really hope you go back and look at some of these ways that we looked at to embody our values. Not only did we have these 3 themes that guided us over the year, but we also had rituals that have pulled us together over and over and over again throughout the years. We had our water communion, we had our forgiveness ritual, our fire communion, our hand blessing, and just last Sunday, our flower communion. In addition to all of these things that we did this past year, we took some field trips. We went and visited other UU churches like Port Townsend and Woodinville. We had some Unitarian Universalist services, which you're also going to have in the next couple weeks. And then we also had some guest speakers like Matt Myers and Dr. Harvey, like I talked about. The ultimate goal of this whole year was to take the theme of last year's General Assembly, and for those that don't know about General Assembly is our yearly gathering of Unitarian Universalists nationwide and internationally, and it's a week that's spent in worship, in workshops, in business modules and everything, and last year's theme was rooted, inspired, and ready. So we broke those down over the year. And our goal, our ultimate goal, was for you this year to come out of the year rooted in who you are, in your history, in the history of Cascade Unitarian Universalists, in the history of Unitarian Universalists, inspired by different kinds of wisdom and understanding in the world, and ready to know what your values are, ready to enact your values, and to be able to walk as a Unitarian Universalist in this world and in your life. So our prayer today is our body prayer, which we have done many different times on our Sundays together. And I invite you now to either remain sitting or you can stand however you want. So our first action is we reach our arms up. We are grateful for the wisdom that we have been given this year. We open ourselves to further wisdom and trust the wisdom within us. We drop our hands to our sides, leaving space between our arms and our body. We are grateful for the energy we have been given, the energy to live our lives, to be forces in this world, to stand up for justice, to explore the ways that we are rooted. And we bring our hands to our hearts. We are grateful for the love that we have been given in our lives, in our community. We let that love expand to those around us. Let that compassion grow within us and for others. And we place our hands together and we bow slightly. We are grateful for the blessings in our life. May we hold them ever so gently and not take them for granted. Amen. Please raise your spirit and voice for our closing hymn, which reminds us how to be rooted, inspired, and ready. The song we begin again in love.
We enter community intentionally, living with grace and love each day. and sorrows. We share our gifts and strength in service to the world. And when we fall, we forgive and begin again in love. We enter community intentionally, living with grace and love each day. We enter community, beloved community. We celebrate our values on our way. Listening and speaking, embracing joys and sorrows. We share our gifts and strength in service to the world. And when we fall, we forgive and begin again in love. We begin again in love.
May you be rooted in your being, inspired in your life, and ready to live your faith fully each day. Love be with you. Please join me in our collective chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please raise your hands in the spirit of connection for our closing song.
Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.